Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to another Mystery Monday. Happy Monday, guys. By the way, I hope you all had a great weekend. If you're new here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases on this channel on Mondays. So if that's something that you're into, then please come and join us and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. So today's case takes us to Thanksgiving 2016 in Knoxville, Tennessee, where Joel Guy Sr. and his wife Lisa Guy were found dismembered in their home. The turn this case took is crazy, and it's also just really sad, and the scene of the crime is probably one of the most insane that I have ever read about or even seen, because there's body cam footage of it, like police body cam footage from when they entered the home and made the discovery. And it paints a really heartbreaking picture of what happened to this couple, who also by all accounts were just seemed to be really lovely people. You know, they loved each other. People said they were the perfect couple. They had a great family and they really cared for their family as well. So it just makes this whole case even more heartbreaking. So Joel Michael Guy Sr. was born in Seguinsville, Tennessee on the 10th of February 1955. He married his first wife, Patricia, in 1973, and the two of them had 3 daughters together. So they were twins named Michelle and Angela, and then they had another daughter named Shandace. Joel and Patricia had already actually been divorced once and remarried, but eventually they split again for good, and Joel Sr. went on to marry another woman named Lisa Mardia in 1985. The two of them were truly just made for each other, and if you believe in soulmates, they were pretty much as good as an example as any. They both had a great sense of humor, and everybody that knew them admired how kind-hearted and compassionate they were towards each other. They also loved their kids, their grandchildren, and of course their beloved dog Jake. Reading about them, they just sound like the perfect couple. They really enjoyed spending time outdoors and out on the water together, but most of all, they just enjoyed spending time together, which is really just everything you need in life. They loved just being in each other's company. Lisa welcomed her stepchildren into her life with open arms, the girls from Joel Sr.'s previous marriage, and they would often come and visit Joel and Lisa over the summers. And on the 13th of March 1998, Joel Sr. and Lisa gave birth to a son of their own named Joel Michael Guy Jr., who the family called Joel Michael to be able to tell him apart from his dad, obviously. So on Thursday, the 24th of November 2016, the guys decided to hold a family Thanksgiving dinner at their home to celebrate the holiday, but also celebrate their retirements, because they were both going to be retiring, I think, within the next week. Lisa was definitely going to be retiring from her job within the next week of this dinner. After their retirement, they were going to be moving from Knoxville, where they were currently living, to Seguinsville. So this had already been finalized. They were ready for the move. Their house had been sold and it was all happening, right? It was all happening. So it was a big celebration for the holidays and everything that was going on in their lives. So Joel Sr.'s 3 daughters, their partners, and all of their children attended. And then, of course, Lisa and Joel Sr.'s son, Joel Jr., also was there for this Thanksgiving dinner. And everybody had a great time. Joel Sr. and Lisa were so happy and so excited to just be surrounded by family and to be able to spend time with their grandchildren. And it was just said to be a really wholesome night. Everything wrapped up eventually and everybody went home that night except for Joel Jr., who stayed, and the next day he helped his dad take the boat to their new house in Seguinsville. 4 days later, on the 28th of November, Lisa was supposed to show up for work at 7 a.m. for her last week of work before her retirement. A bunch of her co-workers had put together a special lunch for her to, I guess, just send her off and celebrate her retirement, but she never showed up for work that morning. And by 7:15 a.m., so she's only 15 minutes late by this point, but her supervisor, Jennifer Whited, immediately started calling her and texting her and trying to get in contact with her. Eventually, when she couldn't get in contact with Lisa, she also started trying to contact Lisa's husband, Joel Sr., and she was texting him and calling him, and she never got a response from either of them. She was already concerned. That's why she started texting and calling Lisa in the first place, because Lisa was just so reliable. She would never show up late for work without calling or texting or just letting them know and giving them an excuse, or, you know, just telling them why she wasn't going to be in. So she's already concerned, but now she's texting and calling her. She's texting and calling her husband. Neither of them are responding. And she called them, I think she said that she called them about 20 times with no response. And so it's clear that she was immediately concerned, and because she couldn't get in contact with them, she decided to call the police, the non-emergency number for the police department, and just tell them what was going on and request a welfare check on them.
Police Communications Center. Yes, I have an employee that has not reported for work today, and highly unlike her. I've tried calling her home number, I've tried calling cell phone, and can't get a hold of her. What can we do about that? Can somebody go by and check on them?
Yeah, do you know her address?
I do.
What is that?
It is.
Okay. And what is your name, ma'am?
My name is Jennifer Whited, Whited.
And what company are you with?
Jacobs Engineering.
And what's a good callback for you guys?
It is 865.
Okay, what's the employee's name?
Lisa Guy, Guy. Her husband's name is Joel, Joel.
Should he be there too? Does he live with her?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
And they do have a dog named Jake. I think he's a big baby.
Okay. How old is she, do you know?
She is in her, I think, late 50s.
Do you know if she has any medical issues?
No, I mean, she has high blood pressure, but that's all that I know of. Yeah, I know that their house is for sale, and they are moving, and she is leaving our company, but that's supposed to be Friday, and this definitely isn't like her just not to show up.
Okay. I'll send a call over to officers, have them swing by and check on her. And if anything changes before then, just give us a call back here, okay?
At the same number?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Stephen Ballard is the one who conducted the welfare check. He went to the guy's house and he knocked, he rang the doorbell, and there was no answer. He attempted to go around the back of the house, but the fence and the gate to the back was locked, so he left the property and he let dispatch know that he wasn't able to make contact. After about an hour, Jennifer at work and all of Lisa's co-workers as well, they still hadn't heard from Lisa, they still hadn't heard from her husband, and they were just really worried about her. This was so out of the ordinary, and so they made the decision to call the police again. This time on the phone, Jennifer basically pleaded with the operator for them to do a second wellness check and just told them that she just felt like something was off because this was so out of character for Lisa. The operator told Jennifer that she would pass her concerns on to a detective and they would figure out what they were going to do. And then about 20 to 30 minutes after that, Jennifer gets a call back from the police, and this time it's a detective that's calling her. And this detective is asking her a whole bunch of questions. Didn't explicitly say what they had found in the house, but it obviously wasn't good based on how many questions they were asking her and the kind of questions they were asking her. So Jennifer obviously didn't know at the time, but the detectives had gone back to the guy's house, and inside the home, they had made a gruesome discovery. So basically what had happened is after her second request for a wellness check, the police decided to send another detective out there named Detective Jeremy McCord, and he went out and he met Detective Ballard there, which was the detective who conducted the initial wellness check. The purpose of this second visit was to take a more thorough look and try to get inside the house or at least look through the windows or something, because the first welfare check really wasn't, he just kind of knocked, rang the doorbell, and then he left. So they just wanted to go back and really have a better look into it because Jennifer was clearly pretty concerned. And also what she was saying, it was alarming to them as well. So it seemed like something was going on. So when the two detectives get back to the house for the second welfare check, they notice there are cars in the driveway, but the house is all locked up. They knock, they ring the doorbell, of course, nobody answers. And so they decide to look through a window of the property, and they see that there are kind of all of these groceries on the floor of the foyer of the home. And there are things in these grocery bags like meat, ice cream, beer, like things that really you would think that as soon as you get home from your grocery shop, you would put them straight into the fridge. Detective McCord also recalled that at this time is when he started to feel a heat emanating from the house, and he could also smell a chemical odor coming from the house, but they weren't sure what was causing this heat and this smell. But obviously all of these things are looking really concerning. So the detectives, they become worried for the welfare of Lisa and Joel Sr., and they decide to enter the property. They call the real estate agent up. The real estate agent tells them there should be a lockbox on the front door with a spare key inside, which wasn't there. It was nowhere to be found. The front door handle also looked kind of weird. It just looked mismatched for the door. And then the back doorknob, or the back door, didn't have a doorknob. The doorknob was missing. So things are just getting weirder and weirder. The real estate agent told the detectives that they could go and check the cars and that maybe there would be a garage remote in some of the cars that were at the home. Luckily, one of the vehicles was unlocked and there was a garage remote in the car, and so they were able to access the house that way. As they entered the home, they said that the smell of the chemicals and the heat as well, it was so hot in the house and it just kind of hit them in the face. It was really overwhelming. And it was really apparent that something very bad had happened in this house. So they start making their way through, they're announcing their presence constantly and just kind of preparing themselves and bracing themselves for what they're inevitably going to find. So they enter through the garage, which leads towards the back of the house and into a sort of reception room that connects to the kitchen. On the kitchen table, they find a bunch of items. They find 2 wallets, a handbag, a bunch of cash, and a set of locking pliers. Next to the table is a pile of garbage bags, what looks like towels, bleach, and baking soda. In the kitchen, there's a cell phone on the kitchen counter, and opposite that is a stove and oven, which are both on. And there's also a large covered pot on the burner. One of the officers actually went and turned the burner off before continuing their sweep of the house. In the dining room, there was a ton of other stuff on the table and on the floor. There were multiple rifles and shotguns and a bunch of ammunition all stacked up on the floor. Then also downstairs, they noticed that the thermostat was set to the maximum temperature of 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 32 degrees Celsius. The oven and the stove were obviously on as well, so you can just imagine how hot it was in this house. On the staircase leading upstairs, they find blood stains on the carpet and the walls, and then at the top of the stairs, they find a massive blood stain, a pile of women's clothing, a pair of scissors, and containers of chemicals. In the primary bedroom, again, there's stuff everywhere, but most notably, there was plastic sheeting and a note on the dresser. In the bathroom of the primary bedroom, there was plastic sheeting all over the floor and 2 plastic tubs, each filled with various body parts and chemicals. The officers actually described it as a diabolical stew of human remains. In that same bathroom was a garden hose connected to the shower pipe, a knife in the sink, and some rubber gloves on the counter. In the guest bedroom, which was Joel Jr.'s childhood room, on the dresser in that room there was a box of bullets, a box of gloves, and a bottle of hydrogen peroxide with dried blood on it. On the floor there was a suitcase and a maroon backpack. On the bed was another blood stain, and then nearby was a laptop with an external hard drive attached. The guest bathroom had a pile of men's clothes on the floor, and there was blood and bandages everywhere. On the counter of the bathroom was another knife. The upstairs thermostat was also set to its maximum temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 35 degrees Celsius. In another room upstairs, a bedroom which had been converted into a workout room, there was another pile of clothes on the floor as well as 2 knives. In the corner of the room, there was a large amount of blood, and there was also a pair of severed male hands on the floor. Exercise equipment had been knocked over, and the blinds on the window appeared to be damaged, so it looked like a struggle had taken place in this room. The house was obviously declared a crime scene, and responding officers went outside the property and called for backup. Forensics came to the house, and also the medical examiner went through and observed all of the remains as they were found in the home before they were moved and taken away. Obviously, after everything we'd just gone over that was found in the house, it was immediately evident that something very, very gruesome and horrible had taken place in that home. But the most shocking thing that was found was actually found in that pot that had been found simmering away on the stovetop. And inside that pot was actually the decapitated head of Lisa Guy. Lisa and Joel Sr. were murdered in one of the most horrific, one of the most gruesome ways that I've ever heard of in my 8 years of doing these cases. When their bodies were found, they had been dismembered and their remains had been put in these big plastic tubs that had been filled with chemicals, obviously in an attempt to try and speed up the decomposition of their bodies. By the time officers arrived at the scene, the decomposition process was already so far along that it was actually difficult to determine the extent of the injuries that they sustained before they were dismembered. The medical examiner noted that Joel Sr. had been stabbed or cut at least 42 times and that some of these injuries were 1 to 7 inches in length and some were as deep as 6 inches. The majority of his skin had already been chemically dissolved aside from the back of him, the back of his remains, and the rest of it was essentially just exposed muscle and the fatty tissue beneath the skin. His liver, his lungs, his kidney, and his ribs were all determined to have been injured before he was dismembered in the attack. Lisa's injuries were also just as significant. She had been stabbed or cut at least 31 times, with some of these injuries being 6 to 7 inches deep. Similarly to Joel Sr., the majority of the skin on the front of her body had been chemically dissolved, and she also had internal injuries to her left kidney, her liver, her heart, her lungs, and her spine. And the obvious difference between the attacks on both Lisa and Joel is that Lisa had been decapitated and her head was simmering in that pot on the stove. The liquid in that pot that her head was found in also was different from the liquid in the tubs, the chemical liquid, and it didn't appear to have a chemical smell like the chemical liquid in those tubs. Her hair and her skin were also still intact, so it's unclear why a different liquid was used, why chemicals weren't used for her head, or why there was a different method used at all, because it seemed clear that the killer was trying to destroy their remains. Their torsos had even been cut open, which was likely another attempt to speed up the decomposition process. But then again, her head wasn't placed in the chemical solution, and nor was Joel Sr.'s hands. So not sure if the killer was trying to send a message here or if they had kind of abandoned the whole process in the middle of it or what was going on. There was obviously a lot of questions that needed to be answered. One thing was clear though, that this was a crime of hatred and this was a crime of passion, and so police immediately started looking into people that were closest to Joel Sr. and Lisa. Obviously, the investigation got underway immediately. The neighborhood was canvassed, police went door to door and just tried to see if anybody in the area had seen anything, had heard anything, but nobody had. And so they went and they started contacting family members of Joel Sr. and Lisa. Police reached out to Joel Sr.'s daughter, Michelle, and she was given the painful task of telling the rest of the family what had happened. She also lived in Knoxville, like her parents were still living in Knoxville at the time that this had happened. They hadn't made the move to Seguinsville yet. And she was extremely cooperative with police and was also able to help them with a timeline of events leading up to the murder. So she explained the Thanksgiving dinner, and she was also able to provide photos of, everybody in kind of their immediate family and everybody that was at that Thanksgiving dinner. The search of the house actually provided a lot of evidence, and as we saw in that walkthrough of the body cam footage, there was a lot of stuff in the house. Stuff was just everywhere: guns, knives, ammunition, chemicals, and really an array of other suspicious items. They recovered 2 receipts from the scene, which were dated 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. from Saturday the 26th of November. These were from Walmart, and one of these receipts listed peroxide. Police went and asked this Walmart for their CCTV footage, and when they looked through it, they found footage of Lisa at the Walmart purchasing all of the items that had been found in the foyer, so those groceries that had never been put away. As they continue to look through this CCTV footage, they actually find footage of Lisa and Joel Sr.'s son, Joel Jr., and he has visible wounds on his body, even in this CCTV footage, and he's also there buying items that it seems like he was buying them to treat his wounds, so bandages, peroxide, and alcohol. This footage gave police a timeline of when this attack likely took place and also a very, very suspicious looking son. And then to make that even worse, the most intriguing item was found inside that maroon backpack that was found in the guest bedroom. In this bag were a bunch of books labeled as belonging to Joel Jr., and amongst these books was a notebook filled with writing which appeared to be a detailed plan of the crime. And police were, for obvious reasons, operating under the assumption that this was Joel Jr.'s backpack. This letter was found in the backpack, and so he very quickly became the prime suspect for his parents' murders. It's so insane that it's hard to believe that it could belong to Joel Jr. Not only because the words in the notebook are so insane, but also because it's hard to believe that somebody planning to murder their parents would be so stupid as to write down the entire plan, the motive, everything, and then leave that at the scene of the crime. Like, there was obviously an effort made by the killer to clean up the scene of the crime and dispose of evidence and dispose of even the bodies, so as you would assume to not get caught. So to leave this notebook with an admission, a plan for the murders, a motive, all written inside it, and, in his old childhood bedroom, in his backpack, with things in the backpack that make it very obvious that the backpack belongs to him, for police to find, there's part of me that thinks this is so stupid that it has to be somebody had set it up to frame him, right? Because who could be that dumb? There were about 5 pages of writing in this notebook, and I'm gonna show you some photos and put them on the screen, but I'm also gonna read and go over some of the main parts of what this psycho wrote in this book. So one of the pages read, and this is all kind of in dot points, right? Get killing knives, quiet, multiple. Get carving knives to make small pieces. Get sledgehammer, crush bones. Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat. Get bleach, denature proteins. Get plastic bin for denaturation process. Does not matter where they're killed. Just get rid of bloody spots to prevent evidence of time of death, not the mattress or couches. Get rid of bodies inside the house, there and my DNA already there. Open up doggy door to provide entryway, crossed out. He needs to be blamed, not intruder. Flush chunks down toilet, not garbage disposal. Get plastic sheeting for disposal process. He writes, get hollow point bullets just in case, which he's crossed out and says, will be seen buying bullets, so just use computer room gun. Check to make sure there are bullets, in brackets, last resort. He's not alive to claim her half of the insurance money, all mine, in brackets, $500,000. Flood the house, covers up forensic evidence. Turn heater up as high as it goes, speeds decomposition. Bleach reacts with luminol just like blood. Douse area with bleach. Big sprayer, lie, trash compactor, body gives time of death, alibi. Don't have to get rid of body if there is no evidence, forensic evidence on his body, his fingerprints and DNA. His plan continues, minimize things I touch throughout visit. Wear gloves and socks to prevent fingerprints and footprints. Drop something down the garbage disposal to break it. Get him on the ground fixing it. Kill him with the knife. Clean up mess from him before she gets home. Kill her with knife. Kill dog after, which he's crossed out and replaced with leave alive, fingerprints. Take dog with you. Place her in the shower, and then he's got dog and has crossed dog out. Turn on hot water and point at her to get rid of forensics. Remove her clothes and take them with me for disposal. Placed him in plastic bin and use it to get him into the upstairs bathroom. Cut off his arm and plant his flesh under her fingernails. Place her hand with his DNA so that his DNA is not washed away by shower. Use sodium hydroxide to destroy his soft tissue and soften bones for transport. Baste once every hour to accelerate. Flush sodium hydroxide down the toilet. Wash out bin with handheld shower head and then direct handheld into toilet to flush everything out of the pipes and into the public waterway. Douse killing rooms, in bracket kitchen, with bleach. Place hair curler with flammable paper and flammable containers of gasoline in 4 locations. His killing room, her killing room, his bathroom, her bathroom. Wipe down areas near killing rooms and bathroom. Turn heaters up to 90 degrees to melt fingerprints and dry everything. Set her phone to send me a text message late Sunday to prove that I was in Baton Rouge and she was alive. Leave through front door and wipe down doorknobs. Timer for flammable set to Friday at 10 a.m. Sunlight mask fire, but not smoke. Everyone at work, so they can't report it. Ultraviolet light shows fingerprints. Check mail before leaving. To get rid of blood, use peroxide and bleach. Destruction of bodies, composition of body, 20% fat, 20% protein, 55% water, 5% other compounds. The notebook also contained a detailed list of Lisa and Joel Sr.'s assets. One section read her life insurance, $500,000, possibly more with double indemnity. With him missing/dead, I get the whole thing. I also read somewhere that he had determined that he would get more money if one of his siblings died. I couldn't see this on the release photos, but I wouldn't put it past this, clear psycho. The note that I mentioned when we were talking about the body cam footage that was found in his bedroom on that dresser, this letter read, and it was obviously written in an attempt to frame his dad, but it read 401k $53,000, bank $20,000. INS $75,000. Hold my old dead ashes and sprinkle us both after you pass at Buzzard's Roost by Angela. Tell all my children I love them, and as you should, I do love you truly. I've had a blast. This guy is insane. He wrote out his entire plan and then left it behind. I don't know if maybe he, because it kind of seemed like maybe he left in the middle of trying to clean everything up and dispose of the bodies. So maybe he planned on coming back to get it. I don't know. In the plan, you can see that he was planning on leaving the doggy door open, but decided against it so that an intruder wouldn't be blamed, because he wanted to frame the whole thing on his dad. He also opted not to go and buy bullets because he knew that he would be seen and there's a possibility of being on CCTV footage buying these bullets. So he just decided to use the bullets and the guns that were already at his parents' house. Also among the items found in his backpack were printouts of instructions on how gas and water heaters work. It's not exactly clear what he was planning to do with the water heater, whether he was going to start a flood or start a fire like his plan suggests. It's actually really fortunate for the couple that Lisa is so reliable that her supervisor started calling her just 15 minutes after she was late for work, because if she had waited any longer, if people maybe hadn't noticed for that whole first day or two, maybe none of this evidence would be found, because like I said, it did seem like, and it looked like the killer had kind of had to leave in the middle of disposing of the remains and trying to clean up the scene and get rid of evidence. It seems that despite their extensive planning, something had come up. Maybe they got injured or whatever it was, because he was seen on the Walmart CCTV wounded, getting things to fix those wounds. So maybe the killer had run into something that made it more difficult and had to leave abruptly, but they would have come back and kind of cleaned everything up, picked up the backpack, the notebook with the plan, the motive, everything. And so if it had been any longer before Jennifer called, maybe they wouldn't have gotten the notebook, the backpack, all of these sort of things. Like I mentioned earlier, there was meant to be a key box or a lock box for the keys for the realtor, and this sat on the doorknob of the front door, and you could only remove it if you knew the code. So this explained why the lockbox had been removed from the front door and why the back door didn't have a doorknob, because they likely took the doorknob from the back door and put it on the front doorknob. And that's also why it looked like that front doorknob didn't fit with the door. It's obvious that the killer didn't want the realtor or anybody else, family, friends, anyone who knew the code coming in and being able to disturb them while they were committing the crime and cleaning up the crime. So Joel Jr. is obviously the prime suspect, because they literally found a backpack with all of his stuff labeled with his name and a detailed plan of the murder inside. On top of this, he was also seen on CCTV footage purchasing a bunch of the items used in the crime. Despite always paying in cash and using the self-checkout lanes, police were able to identify CCTV of him purchasing a bleach sprayer, a knife, and the large blue tubs. They also discovered that he sought medical treatment in Baton Rouge after he was seen purchasing the bandages and stuff at Walmart. So it looked like he'd killed his parents, injured himself in the process, had to abandon the cleanup and the disposal to go and treat his wounds. Maybe he was planning to come back, or maybe he was hoping the house would set on fire like he had mentioned in his plans. And then on top of this, so I'll give you a little background on him, because this is kind of like goes into what they found out about him that also fed into him being a suspect. So he was born on the 13th of March, 1988. He attended Harnville High School and Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts, which he graduated from in 2006. And he was described by people that knew him as a distant outsider. So his parents, particularly his mum Lisa, really spoiled him throughout his entire life into adulthood, but his relationships with his other relatives was pretty much non-existent. After graduating from high school, Joel Jr. spent one semester at George Washington University before transferring to Louisiana State University, which is where he was studying to become a plastic surgeon. He'd lived with his parents in Knoxville pretty much his entire life up until this point, but then when he got into LSU, he moved to Baton Rouge to be closer to his studies. From my understanding, these schools he got into were pretty difficult to get into, so he was obviously a pretty smart guy, I guess, but there was just always something that was kind of off about him. While he obviously did well academically, he really struggled with just kind of, I guess, social interaction and personal relationships. And then in 2015, he actually withdrew from his studies, which he'd been studying for 9 years by this point. So it's obviously a lot to just give all of that up and just drop it. And I know that sounds like a lot of study because it is a lot of study, but from what I read online, it can take 14 to 16 years of education to become a plastic surgeon. But in all of these years, right, so by 2015, he's 27 now, around 27, and he's never held a paying job. He had just been living off his parents. They paid for his tuition, his rent, his utilities, basically everything in his entire life. He was completely dependent on Joel Sr. and Lisa. Even despite having moved away from his parents in Knoxville, he was always welcomed back to their home. They even preserved his room just as he'd left it, his clothes, furniture, everything. He had a key to the house and he visited his parents pretty regularly. His dad, Joel Sr., worked as a pipeline engineer and Lisa worked in HR at another engineering company. And some family members even claimed that the only reason that Lisa had a job was to help pay for stuff for Joel Jr., which is crazy. Apparently her entire paycheck would go towards his tuition, his rent, and whatever else he needed. Joel Sr. was let go from his job in 2016 and he was 61 at this point. Lisa was 55, so he kind of took it as a sign to retire, to sell their house in Knoxville and move back to Seguinsville, which is where they plan to live in a grandparent's former home. And they, Lisa and Joel Sr. weren't super well off, but they had enough money to retire, for both of them to retire and to fund themselves. The catch was, though, that they weren't going to be able to continue supporting Joel Jr. They were going to have to stop financially helping him out. And so they made the difficult decision to financially cut off their 28-year-old son. And also he's 28. He's like a full adult. So I guess it was kind of time as well to kind of push him out of the coop, let him learn to stand on his own 2 feet. By November of 2016, I think they had already kind of broached the subject with him, but according to family members, they were really going to fully break the news to him at Thanksgiving. Of course, they have their Thanksgiving dinner on the 24th of November with all of the family, their children, their partners, their grandchildren. Joel Jr. was there. And like I said, it apparently went really well. Even Joel Jr., who normally is pretty standoffish, was in good spirits. He was socializing with the family. He was even giving some of his old toys to his nieces and nephews. And this is a stark contrast to how he apparently usually acted. Like normally when they had family things, he would just kind of go into his bedroom and hide from everyone. So everyone in the family was actually really pleasantly surprised that he was down, having a good time, he was socializing. It seemed like a good thing. And of course, later that night, everyone goes home, he stays, and apparently the next day, he helps his dad take the boat to their new house that they were moving into in Seguinsville. So he's of course visiting his parents in Knoxville, helping them out in Seguinsville, but he lives himself in Baton Rouge by this point because he's gone to move to Baton Rouge to study, even though he dropped out. That's where he was living at the time of the murders. So with him looking very suspicious, the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Department, the Knox County Sheriff's Department, and the FBI all started closely monitoring his movements. So they were all kind of working together collectively. On the 29th of November, at around 3:45 p.m., as Joel Jr. left his apartment in Baton Rouge, he was arrested. Detective McCord said he knew why we were there and he knew he was caught. During a search of his car, police found a KitchenAid and a meat grinding attachment. And then in his home, they found a dog bone in a blue tub filled with chemicals. So it looked like he had been experimenting with how he was planning to get rid of his parents' remains. As I'm sure you would probably imagine from what you've heard about this guy, he was totally uncooperative with the police right from the start. He also refused to waive his extradition rights because obviously he was, they arrested him in Baton Rouge. He was obviously going to be extradited back to Knoxville, which is where he allegedly committed these murders. The murders of his parents who supported him for his entire life, might I add. Eventually, he was extradited back to Knox County, where he pled not guilty to 7 charges, which were 2 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. He also filed a motion to serve as his own counsel and expressed that he wanted to receive the death penalty if he was found guilty. He did, though, eventually let a state-appointed defender represent him after he was told by the judge that if he did that, he would have a better chance of arguing for the death penalty if he was found guilty. And I also think nothing screams guilty more than saying, if I'm found guilty, though, I want the death penalty. I feel like that no innocent person is doing that, right? So his trial began on the 28th of September in 2020. It was decided that the evidence seized from his apartment in Baton Rouge would be inadmissible in the case because of an issue that they had with the search warrant at the time. Thankfully, though, all of the evidence from Lisa and Joel Sr.'s house was deemed admissible. So during the trial, the prosecution alleged that on the 26th of November, Joel Jr. attacked his father while he was upstairs on the treadmill. He then waited for his mum to get home from doing the groceries, and he then attacked her upstairs as well. It was suggested that he dismembered both of them in the shower and then moved their remains and their body parts into the large plastic tubs that he filled with chemicals. His half-sisters also took the stand, and they spoke about how their family dynamic was very complicated, how Joel Jr. was very much a recluse and that he would always go into his room whenever they were over to the house, and he would basically never interact with them. One of his half-sisters actually said that she didn't believe that Joel Jr. even know her kids' names. So I feel like that tells you everything you need to know about his relationship with his family. His half-sister Angela testified that he was going to be financially cut off by his parents and said that his dad, quote, said that Joel Michael was going to have to be cut off and was going to have to stand on his own 2 feet. Lisa agreed. During their testimonies, one of his half-sisters also confirmed that the room where the backpack was found with all of his stuff and that notebook with basically the confession, the plan, the motive, everything, that was his room that he stayed in over Thanksgiving. Not that there was any doubt anyway, because his DNA was all over the bag. And it was a bag filled with his stuff, so it was obviously his anyway, but it was just kind of an extra confirmation.
She found the defendant's DNA on the notebook. And circumstantially, ladies and gentlemen, when you consider that notebook came from a backpack that was found in the room where his sister testified that he was staying on the Thanksgiving holiday, it makes sense that it's the defendant's notebook and the defendant's writing.
The prosecution also alleged that he had started planning these crimes as early as the 7th of November, which is when they could track him back to going and starting to acquire some of the items that he used for the murders. Joel Jr. never spoke at his trial. Instead, he just sat there throughout, looking at the autopsy photos, listening to the heartbreaking statements, all with a completely blank expression on his face. The court also heard that Joel Jr. only had one friend, and his name was Michael. And Michael also took the stand, and they played a call that Michael had with Joel Jr. while Joel Jr. was in jail. And they played that to the court.
I don't know what to say. All of that aside, I am angry and lost and confused and disappointed and upset and mourning you like your day, even though I'm talking to you on the phone and I don't. It's taking everything I have to process and maintain my sanity.
I mean, that is the biggest thing here is that I think that of you all the time. You were the only good thing in my life. All the crap in the apartment. You're the only thing on this.
The major piece of evidence that the prosecution really honed in on in this trial was, of course, the notebook. From what was written in the book, it was obvious that the motive was financial. Joel Jr. wanted to claim his parents' life insurance money, which honestly they probably could have figured out without the notebook. But the whole thing was written out word for word in this book. And it's just so crazy and so rare that you get this much of an insight into a killer's mind and what they were thinking and doing in the lead up to a murder. This guy was undoubtedly a psycho, and it's honestly a little bit surprising to me that they didn't even try to plead insanity or anything, because even just by looking at this guy's eyes, it's clear that there is just something not right with him. It was actually also discovered that after his parents' deaths, large payments were made to Joel Jr.'s apartment complex, his school, LSU, and also his utility bills. Now, I'm pretty sure that these payments came from Joel Sr.'s account, so it seems like Joel Jr. went into his dad's account and then paid all of these bills. He paid his rent like a year in advance, right after his parents were murdered, which is just insane. I find it so hard to wrap my head around this case, because I'm not surprised that somebody would do this, but also, unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I mean, it should be, right? But the world is, and people are crazy. But I'm also surprised because it's so unfathomable to me how unfeeling you can be, especially about parents that, by all accounts, it seems like they did everything for the guy. His mum was even working a job purely to help him pay for his bills. And then this is how he repays that kindness and generosity. And all of his other siblings and his dad's other children said that they were just the kindest, most generous, most compassionate people. So despite all of the bad things that happen in the world and how kind of unsurprising, horrible things like this are, I find it so hard to wrap my head around a crime like this and just how unfeeling this guy is. His defense never provided any witnesses. They didn't provide any evidence because the prosecution really had him dead to rights, basically. They had so much evidence tying him to the crime, but his defense did still try to argue that he wasn't responsible. So their reasoning and their defense was pretty much that in the lead up, so at the Thanksgiving dinner, he was outgoing, he was happy, he was talkative, and that doesn't seem like somebody who was about to commit a murder, which I would actually disagree. It kind of seems like someone who's trying to cover their own tracks. Like all of a sudden he's acting completely out of the ordinary. Probably he was happy because he knew that he was about to get his parents' life insurance, right? They also noted that Joel Jr. wasn't actually going to be financially cut off until Christmas, so it didn't make sense for him to be the murderer because it wasn't Christmas yet, so he hadn't actually been cut off yet. But like, it's late November, so Christmas is just a month away, and they've just told him that he was going to be cut off, so I really don't understand the argument here. I guess they really just, they were grasping at straws, right? The defense also had issue with the DNA from the notebook. They claimed that Joel Jr.'s DNA was only found on the outside of the notebook, not the inside where the writing actually was. And from my understanding, I think that's purely because they didn't take DNA from inside the book. Like, they didn't test the inside of the book. So it's not that his DNA wasn't there. Not to mention, they also found gloves with blood on the gloves, and Joel Jr.'s DNA was found on the outside of these gloves and on the inside of these gloves, which it would indicate that he was the one wearing them. And they were found at the crime scene. The prosecution also argued that it doesn't even matter that his DNA or the inside of the book wasn't tested for his DNA, because all of the stuff in the book was pretty much only things that Joel Jr. would know. The prosecution also alleged that his plan pretty much started falling apart when he sustained injuries either during the attack on his parents or during the dismemberment process, which is when he had to go and seek medical attention for those injuries and had to kind of leave in the middle of his cleanup process. It's not clear whether he went back to Baton Rouge simply for medical treatment, whether he went back there to try and establish an alibi, or if maybe he went back there just because he kind of gave up and was like, you know what, probably I've made it so the house will set on fire, so I'm just going to leave it and wait for that, and he just kind of gave up, because he does seem like the kind of guy to just give up on things or not really put much effort into things. You know, he's 28 years old, he's never had a job, he's never put any effort into having relationships with any of his family members. Accusations were made, like I said, that he had tried to burn the house down, so maybe he just thought that would happen and that would get rid of all the evidence. Like, all of the evidence would be lost in the fire that he thought he set. Who knows? You know, the notebook, he wrote that he believed the Knoxville house would be probably worthless after it burnt down or after the fire. I personally do think that he was going to come back after he kind of sorted out his injuries. I mean, surely you wouldn't be stupid enough to just kind of leave a crime scene with that much evidence tying you to it there. So if it wasn't for Lisa's supervisor, Jennifer, calling up and being so persistent about them doing a welfare check, I mean, I think they still would have caught the guy, but they wouldn't have had all of this evidence and this notebook, and maybe he would have gone back and started the fire. He would have cleaned up, who knows. So at the trial, there were more than 700 pieces of evidence presented. There were 27 witnesses, and the trial lasted for 4 days. Then on the 2nd of October 2020, a jury found Joel Guy Jr. guilty on all 7 charges, and Knox County Judge Stephen Sword sentenced the now 32-year-old to 2 life sentences to be served consecutively. And he also said of the crime, "Hopefully it's the most severe I see in my career," however long that lasts. Not only was the method that this guy used to kill his parents seriously disturbing, but the motive and the planning that led up to this as well is so bone-chilling. I just cannot fathom somebody killing their parents for money. I know that it happens, I know, but in this scenario as well, you know, his parents, everyone said they were such great people. All of his other siblings loved their parents and had nothing but good things to say about them. And they financially supported him for his whole life in every way that they could. He'd never even had a job because they paid his rent. They paid all of his bills. They paid his tuition, which is plastic surgery tuition. I feel like that's got to be really expensive. His mum literally worked a job just to support him. And then as soon as they want to retire and live their lives and they're not able to financially support him anymore, he kills them. And in such a horrific way, like the most gruesome way that you can imagine. And it's not like there were any warning signs either. Like, sure, he was a recluse, sure, he was a bit, you know, not socially out there. He didn't really talk to many people, but it's not like he had any signs that he was going to kill his parents. And to kill your own parents because they cut you off, because they're retiring, they can't afford to support you anymore, is just unimaginable. His sisters were also so fond of Joel Sr. and Lisa, so the hole that this and the impact that this left on all of their lives is just unimaginable. They were supposed to have so much time with their parents. They were supposed to have so much time to give their parents with their grandchildren. You know, their Joel Sr. and Lisa were so excited to spend as much time as they could with their grandchildren. And then they were murdered for trying to do the right thing. You know, they were retiring, they couldn't afford to do it anymore, but also they wanted to help him stand on his own 2 feet and be an adult and learn to support himself. These are some of the victim impact statements that were read at Joel Jr.'s sentencing, and it really just highlights just the hurt that this left behind.
My sister Lisa Guy was truly one of the most loving, caring, and forgiving people on the face of this earth. Her husband, my brother-in-law, Joe Guy Sr., was honestly one of the most down-to-earth, hard-working, and kind people I ever met.
And he was so proud to have his grandchildren. And they miss their papa. He won't get to watch them grow up, him or Lisa, either one now.
Dad and Lisa were wonderful. They were larger than life. They were so happy and such really good people. And they loved him. They loved him so much. They loved all of us. And for anyone to do what he did, I don't understand it. He has taken something from myself, from my children, his Dad and Lisa's grandchildren, my husband, everyone in our family. He has taken something from us that we'll never get back.
Like for 4 years, I felt like I've pushed it down like it's not actually happening. But it's real. And they're gone. And Dad was my best friend. And I'll never get to hear his laugh again. Or his just incredible hugs. I'll never get to sit and banter with him and hear the same stories we've all heard over and over, but they're still just as hilarious because Dad was such a storyteller.
My dream was to hold my mom's, Lisa's hand as she took her last breath. My dream was to hold my dad's hand as he took his last breath. People take moments like that for granted, but I wanted those moments with my whole soul. Not only that, the kid's childhood was taken away. I am angry for my dreams being destroyed, but I'm not the only one that's been affected. This has impacted my kids, and for that I will never be able to forgive. I rest easy knowing that God is okay with my choice not to forgive someone that has murdered my parents.
So like I said before, Joel Jr. was ordered to serve his life sentence consecutively, which means his first life sentence has a parole period of 51 years. But after that 51 years, instead of being eligible for parole, he then has to begin serving his second life sentence. So he's basically going to die in jail. He also received 4 years for his abuse of a corpse charge. So all in all, he won't be eligible for release for 130 years. He also never did get the death penalty like he hoped for, which would have just been the coward's way out, in my opinion. And also, did you know that I always find this interesting because, I feel like there's such a debate about people who agree and don't agree with the death penalty. And one of the reasons I always see for the death penalty is the cost of keeping someone in prison for their entire life. It's actually more expensive to give someone the death penalty than it is to keep them in prison for their entire life. Anyway, he did try to appeal his conviction, and his lawyer argued that when Joel was visiting his parents' house, he should have been considered a part-time resident or overnight guest, which would have given him a reasonable expectation of privacy within the house. So he argued that police shouldn't have been allowed to enter the house without a warrant, even if they suspected that something had gone on or that somebody was in danger, which is why they entered the house, and for good reason. But basically they argued they shouldn't have been allowed to do that without a warrant under any circumstance, and so all of the evidence from inside the house should be deemed inadmissible. The judge did deny this appeal, thankfully. So as it stands, Joel Jr. is serving his sentence at Northwest Correctional Complex in Tiptonville, Tennessee. And that's everything for this case. That's all I have for you guys. This case honestly blew my mind. I don't know if you could tell, I'm just like, when I say I'm like so shocked but not shocked, I'm just so shocked. Like, it's so hard for me to wrap my head around something like this, and for someone like that to do something to his parents that gave him everything. It's so unfathomable to me. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, because this case, I have not been able to stop thinking about it since I started looking into it. So let me know what you guys think. As always, I'll be down in the comments below to discuss all of your thoughts. But that's everything for me today, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.